I hereby call to order this meeting of the Strategic Housing Finance Corporation of Travis County. It is Friday the 19th, 11:14 a.m. by my watch. And we will proceed by roll call and confirmation of quorum.
President Julio Gonzalez Altamirano,
Present.
Vice President Jan Winning,
Present.
Director Delete Becker, Director Keisha Prince,
Here.
Director Lisa Rings,
Here.
Director Rebecca Weber. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Is there anybody signed up for citizen communication?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I will wait 15 seconds to see if anybody contacts us or arrives, and then I'll proceed. I don't see anyone joining us. Has anybody indicated to you that they want to join or want to come? There is no acknowledgement of anybody wishing to participate, so we're going to move on to discussion items. And we are going to begin with private activity bonds. Yes.
Yes,
Should we do
yes,
private activity
yes.
bonds first? Yes, let's do.
Yes, I couldn't.
I wanted to make sure, I was like, let
I
me
had to
see
put my
if
glasses back on.
we agree on this order, all right. Private activity bonds. And presenting on private activity bonds will be.
Brax.
Mr. Brax, go ahead. The floor is yours. I believe you have a presentation that we may want to see. We look kind of like little twins.
We kind of do.
I did. Ahead of time.
Yes.
Oh, I know, it's like a.
I didn't bring my glasses. So.
Oh, some work session on this next time, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better.
Better
Okay.
coordination, I guess. But yeah, so Bryson Parsons, Hilltop Securities, financial advisor to the HFC. Kevin, thank you for bringing up the presentation. So yeah, I'm going to kind of discuss housing bonds and the main focus private activity bonds or PABs for the state of Texas. So required title screened by Hilltop. That's second required title screen by Hilltop. And then this is our contact information for everyone here at Hilltop. I've become the main contact for strategic. Then of course there's Tim Nelson, Claire, Megan, and our new analysts, Lena and Chelsea. Lena has been, or Chelsea, sorry, has been helping me a lot with strategic items. So we can get into the actual meat of the presentation is up next. Thanks.
And Braxton, can I just interject? Is it okay if board members, if they have a question on a particular slide, speak up now?
Yeah, if you guys want, yeah, throw up your hand or just yell at me or however you want to indicate me to shut up, I will. But so for Texas HFCs, you're governed by Chapter 394, as stated at the top of the slide here. And there are some minimum requirements through 394 when you guys are the owner of the property that you have to kind of adhere to. Essentially, that 90% of the units have to be at an income defined by the HFC, so it's for low and moderate incomes. Additionally, to issue bonds when you have an ownership portion of the property, you have to have at least 50% of the units for individuals that are earning at least less than 80% of the area mean income. When you get into private activity bonds or and would that include LIHTC credits or low income housing tax credits, this is almost not an issue because most of those deals carry 100% at 60% AMI, or they'll have it they'll. I guess there are some that they actually go farther, and there are a few that have been including like 80% at the 60 and then 20% at a market rate. But those are still well within the requirements of 394. So thanks. And then just kind of getting into just what is a tax exempt muni bond. Essentially, these are debts and loans that are issued by kind of a state or local authority. You guys would be considered a local authority as you were created on behalf of Travis County. You would have purchasers that would kind of go through and they would purchase out tax exempt bonds that would be using for kind of federal debt purposes. These are considered tax exempt for the interest on the loan for the investors. So they kind of come in with lower rates. So the advantage of issuing bonds for the developer is, hey, we're going to get a lower interest rate on these because the investors don't have to pay taxes. So it's kind of a win for them for their funding sources. There is a required tax opinion that has to come through this, that a tax counsel or sometimes a bond counsel like Cliff would construct and write. So I'm part of the, on behalf of the HFC and the issuance. We can go to the next slide. So then when we get into actual private activity bonds or a PAB, I'm going to do my best not to use acronyms. Unfortunately, I started at the state, so I constantly use them. It is my crutch. But the private activity bond is used to essentially have private activities, which but have to have a benefit to the public. One of the main uses, especially in Texas, is public housing. That for the private activity bond here, I would say roughly 80% of that is dedicated to housing, be it single family or multifamily housing. But there are other uses. There's student loan bonds have started coming through. There's also kind of recycling plants, water conservation, or water or what is it? Just really water movement. There used to be a, Saws from San Antonio was doing a big deal where they're moving water from the aquifers out from West Texas. It's kind of neat. But what this kind of ends up doing is it moves the risk to the private side of this transaction, because it is the developers that are benefiting from this. You guys are acting as the conduit issuer, and then they are really doing the project and making repayments on these bonds and these loans.
Ooh, talk about that. Because usually when people think that term conduit issuer is very important, because usually when I look at the city budget, for example, you have a sense of, oh, look, they've got all this general obligation debt and they must pay interest, which is why they collect taxes to pay the interest. When we say we are the conduit issuer, we are basically just putting a stamp of approval on debt sold by our developer partners.
Yes, technically the debt is sold by you because you are the issuer. So it is
But it's their
but
obligation.
It is their obligation. So the debt that is issued, it is solely repayable by the revenues of the project. So there is no, actually I have a slide on this somewhere.
Oh,
There's
there we go.
there's no obligation to the county entity. There's a small obligation to the issuer. However, again, it's solely repayable through the revenues of the project or the development.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No,
Go
it's
ahead, go ahead.
We can, next one, Kevin, thank you. So typically these private activity bonds, again, they're issued either through an HFC like Strategic or a PFC, a public facility corporation, or there are state issuers for housing specifically. There's TDHCA and TSHAC. There's also the Higher Education Coordinating Board issues these type of bonds through the states. And then there are some economic development corporations and IDCs, industrial development corporations. See, I know the acronyms.
But just to clarify, for housing, is it only the PFCs and HFCs that can issue it?
TDHCA and
Oh.
TSHAC can as well. Texas Department of Housing and Community
Yeah.
Affairs and the Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation.
Yep.
So don't test me on it. So those are the four issuers of housing. I mean, really, the majority does go through the HFCs and the PFCs, though. So again, yeah, so the HFCs, they really just assist the developers in the issuing of lower cost of financing and then the lower rates as discussed previously. Yes, sir.
So do you have a sense of what a typical rate on a bond might be compared to what a developer might get at a bank?
Exactly my question. Yeah, what's the advantage? What's the benefit that we're offering?
So the biggest benefit when you issue a private activity bonds is it allows access to the low income housing tax credits.
Mhm.
So I mean that you are required to have the private activity bonds included in the financing stack to have access to those 4% tax credits, which can typically the finance is about 30% of a transaction. Rate wise, I mean, when you go through a private loan, I've seen rates somewhere between 6.5 to 8s right now. Bond rates, depending on just the length of the transaction, or if they have a credit enhancement, I've seen those as low as right now, maybe 3.5 up to 5-ish.
How about ours?
Oh, cash flows. Oh, yeah, they're cheap. I mean, they're like low threes, almost twos.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Oh, he was asking about cashback. So
There's a structure where the bonds are always secured.
they're secured by cash. So you have low risk with those because there's almost no default risk because you're holding the amount of the bonds already. So those would go for high two rates, low threes right now.
A couple of years
In-
ago, those were going.
For
But
us,
she,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Applied to
she had a
us.
question.
if you could just apply it to us. What
Her
our
question was a
our
rates typically.
I mean, your rates would depend on the financing structure. I mean,
Recently.
recently for Blue Ridge, that was your last transaction, the only transaction I've worked on with you.
Yeah.
For a pad that was mid threes, no, that was high threes, wasn't it?
Thanks. I can find it.
Thank you.
So there's a significant difference between what a developer and their cost of capital would be if they didn't have access to this tax exempt stream.
Yes.
And one of the things, I don't know if you said this, and I think I understood this correctly, the IRS, the feds limit how much of these types of bonds can be issued within a state.
Yes.
Right, and so that's why we've got to go and ask for from the pool, and maybe you'll get to that, maybe not. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you're correct. So there is a limit for each state. So I'll get to that in a couple of
Great.
slides. But I guess the biggest difference too, between when you do a private loan, like a private loan and these private bonds, the income restrictions will be totally different. Since the rates are higher on those conventional loans, they're not going to be able to put in the 60% units or 50% units that you would in a light tech deal, or the amount that they would. Because like I said previously, the light tech deals are almost 100% at 60. You're not going to get a conventional program that can do that. It's just they can't cover the debt service they'll have to pay.
So is it fair to say that using a formula that you guys can use better than me? Our developers are experiencing really in the millions of dollars with these rate differences?
Depending on the size, yeah, it could
The
get that
blue-
high. I mean, I didn't really look at what.
So our typical issue is 50 million.
For the Austin area, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, they are
By
typically,
my calculation, the spread might be 1 to 2 million, but that's over a year. I'm sure, I'm not sure what the pattern of it looks
I
like,
think it's
but
just helpful to use.
yeah.
Numbers.
Yeah.
That are recently applicable to things we voted
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
And I think we could look at something and at least make some assumptions about how much they draw down and when and how long it's out.
Thank you.
and yep, next one. So again, the main takeaway here is just the repayments of the bonds I mean, it is bonds issued from HFC. I mean, they are a limited obligation of the HFC, and again, it's solely paid by the revenues that are received through the project, which are revenues of the rents or parking fees or anything else that's coming through the actual apartment complex. But they're not the main kind of issue that we kind of run into when you are a Travis County entity or a City of Austin entity, is to make sure that the cities and counties are understanding that these are not an obligation of the actual cities or the counties. So they won't be pulling from tax revenue. It's like the GO bonds or general obligation bonds.
So when, and
Yeah.
just to understand the contract, the obligation, so when our developer sells. When we are the conduit issuer for the debt. In the agreement, when you sell the debt. The developer has to pay. Interest. To the holder.
Okay, well, so the developer would pay, so it kind of flows through a cycle. So the developer would, they would receive the funds, through the trustee. Who would basically hold the money, and then developer would then pay the trustee the revenues of the project, and then the trustee would then flow funds to the bond investors
But with interest.
with interest.
Is there any situation where the bondholder can say, I want everything that you owe me immediately?
So that's a call date, or a mandatory tender. So yes, those are stipulated in the bond document. So, for Blue Ridge, for example, the earliest call date that they have is I believe it's October of 2026. I can't remember if it's the 1st or the 15th, but it's October 2026 with a mandatory tender date of I believe it's 2020. I know it's 2028. I believe it's October 2028. Yeah. So those are the first call date is if the investor says, hey, we're kind of done. They can send in or actually, no, I apologize for the current recourse of those. They do not have an investor. That it is only an issue. March 1, 2028. I knew it was 2028 for the mandatory tender. What a lot of these current bonds do is they are the short-term cash collateralized, like Cliff was we spoke a minute ago about. And on these, they have really the bonds are only outstanding for a shorter period of time, roughly 2 to 3 years, really during the construction period, in which then they convert to a permanent loan. And the bonds are redeemed or called, and they are no longer outstanding. So the only debt that is issued, it would be outstanding, is the permanent loan that is flowing through the developer directly.
So it acts like a construction loan.
Basically,
Is the,
and allows
Sure. Oh, yeah, I know.
allows really for
Yes.
the tax credits. Really,
Yes.
if we didn't have to have the productivity bonds to access the 4% tax credits with a cash
People
collateral
might not do
structure,
it. Yeah.
you really wouldn't need the bonds.
and so just to make clear, because there's a part here where I think I've been misunderstanding. When we authorize and say we will be the conduit issuer. A word that we will use in civilian life is the term of a loan, so how long it lasts, right? The private activity bond term of those buying the bonds from the developer through us. How long does that last? What is supposed to be? Because you're describing it as a construction loan, so as a 4-year, 3-year.
For a cash collateralized deal, that's become almost the norm now. Is a lot of these deals do these short-term pieces.
But in our portfolio, some of our previous activity has been not like that.
Correct. So it depends on the structure. So bonds will typically be outstanding for a standard structure where the bonds are long-term, between 30 and 40
That's
years.
right. Okay, so this is a subtle
Yeah,
thing
it
that's
is.
changed that I did not
Yeah, me
grasp.
too.
Thank you
Yeah.
for helping us understand this. And it leads to, I think, our concern, which is the conduit issuer, when can somebody say, where's my $250 million? Right? When is the call date? Where do they have the recourse through the call date to be like, where's this big amount? I want it now. And it's one of the subtle things that I've always been confused about, because my background is more geo bond land. And I'm like, why would they show up in 3 years or what have you and say, where's all my money? Could you explain that kind of? It seems like we are taking on risk that we need to refund
Develop.
the entire amount.
That would be the developer though.
There's no risk. There's no risk to the conduit issuer that somebody's gonna show up on your doorstep
Can
and
you
say,
speak up just
Could
a
you
wee
say-
bit?
Yeah.
There's no risk to the issuer that somebody's gonna show up on your doorstep and say, I want my $30 million or whatever it is tomorrow. The bonds are limited to the revenues that are paid to the issuer by the borrower or by a credit enhancement. And so, I'm sorry, I'll try to talk louder. They can only, is this on? No,
You
y'all
won't
can't-
hear it in through speakers, it's just recording,
Okay.
but yeah, but.
So, just trying to figure out an easier way to say this. The only thing that a bondholder can get from the issuer on one of these conduit deals, it's a revenue bond, which I think almost all of them are, is any money that they're entitled to get under the indenture, which is limited to the revenues or property pledged under the indenture, which would be money from the developer making loan repayments. Or some deals are credit enhanced with bond. We don't see them very much anymore. There used to be bond insurance. There's sometimes letters of credit. There's different ways to secure the bonds. But a developer's not going to show up, knock on your door and say, I want my $30 million.
Oh, well, not the developer,
Yeah.
the bond holder.
Well, yeah. So Braxton, you talked about call dates. So when we negotiate or with the developer, a bond transaction is negotiated. A call date is a date at which the bondholders can go, hey, we'd like these bonds to be repaid now. Is that correct?
The outstanding,
Yes, the balance.
Yes, but then there's a corresponding obligation of someone else
I understand that. Yep.
to pay them.
So
It's
when
not
that
us.
happens, that's right. When it happens, well, the partnership owes it, right? Which we are part of, but only a small part of. And so at that point, and I want to walk through this because we do have one of these transactions coming before the board probably next month. So typically, if the developer hasn't already decided to refinance the loan with a long-term, mortgage, at that point, that's what they would look for. Is that fair? They would be looking for getting a loan to replace the bond
Right.
Yes.
financing. Okay,
Somehow they've got to pay it off,
that's right.
but not from strategic.
That is correct. However, if we're part of a deal, if we have part ownership, if that didn't go well for whatever reason, it can't come for our money, right? But there's there could be reputational risk. We are expecting some income from these deals, et cetera. So again, I think that's worst case scenario. If that's happening, probably other things are going wrong with the deal, one assumes, but I think it is an important clarification that we aren't on the hook directly for the repayment. That's the partnership, which we own a tiny piece of, really the developer. And also that these bonds may get repaid. And again, I want to just keep, it's not a conventional loan, but it's like a loan. They often get repaid early in the life of a project, but we stay in, we keep our ownership because we're still giving tax exemptions, et cetera. There are other parts of the deal that we're involved in.
so what would happen, if I understand the steps correctly, right? And this is the part that I think would worry us. The tender date is achieved. Folks want the bondholder wants capital back. We have a non-performing partner. They are not able to secure capital. We don't have sufficient control or the ability to nudge them to get capital. What would happen is the bondholder would take control of the asset, the property. And then we would be negotiating with them about to keep the exemption, you've got to do these things, and we will be your GP, etc. But in the event that we have a non-performing, poorly performing partner, what is lost to be able to make whole the call is the asset. That's the recourse, ultimately, the asset, right?
Ultimately, there could be differences in structure where the bondholders take something else, but then whoever they take.
Did you say that again?
Yeah, guys, we just generally probably need to speak up.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like a lot of answers, it depends.
Mhm.
Ultimately, yes, the strategic would most likely lose the property. The bondholders may take or a letter of credit. They may take a draw on the letter of credit to get themselves paid back, but then whoever put up the letter of credit that'll be on the property. So it may be several steps, but ultimately strategic would most likely lose its interest in the property.
And then, when you get a call on these bonds as well, it's not like it has to happen. You have to redeem these the next day or week. It's typically six months. It would be in the indenture, but it usually 6 months. Yes.
Experience with that having happened?
Well, we're going through one of those right now.
Yeah.
Well, we're going through a call on the bonds where the developer is getting, a loan to replace it, not a,
Non-performing.
yes.
Not acquiring the asset.
Our partner is performing as we would expect.
Exactly.
Which is to get capital to.
But you're asking about it falling
Oh,
apart.
Just
Yeah.
for our benefit, things we have experience in, things we haven't had experience, and just in that field of possibilities you just described. Have you ever experienced? Yeah, go ahead.
I have not, I think primarily because most of these bond deals historically have been long-term, 15 to 30, 40-year times, and in Texas, where I've done most of my practice, property values have done nothing but increase over that period. There might be dips,
Right.
but over the long haul, the property's always been worth more, well more than the debt that was owed on it. So being able to refinance has not been that hard. And I think that's what we're gonna see on South.
Helpful, thank you.
Thank you for graciously dealing with that interruption, but I think you understand emotionally what the concern is, which is we have not had a chance to ever technically dive into some of the risks
Right.
from legacy process that we have inherited and tried to respect. So thank you, and you may now proceed with your presentation.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate
Yeah.
that, and, thank you.
Of course, no problem. We were on private activity bonds.
The volume
Before
cup.
you get started again, it's 3.35.
3.35.
3.35 was the rate.
Okay.
That was the Blue Ridge rate.
Yeah.
You were very close.
I've slept since then, apologies. But private activity bonds, so this is my bread and butter, unfortunately. I cut my teeth running the private activity bond in Texas, so I apologize if I get too technical. I will do my best. But as mentioned earlier, so the productivity cap in the country is kind of divvied out per state. It is based on the population. So Texas has the second highest population in the country. So we have the second highest amount of productivity bonds available. We came in just over $3.8 billion last year for our productivity cap. Essentially what you do is you take the annual property estimates for a state and multiply that by 125 per capita. The per capita amount typically changes every 2 to 3 years to go up because bond deals and all deals are getting more expensive. So they're trying to kind of build in more cap naturally that way. For Texas, we're overseen by the Texas Bond Review Board. And for how it kind of divvies out is a developer would go and put an application in through the Strategic Housing Finance Corporation, like we did at the last meeting. We induced those 2 transactions from Elmington, and they have made applications since through Cliff, and they are now waiting in line. And once they kind of wait through their cap kind of line, they would get what's called a reservation. That means they are holding on to their inducement amount, which was $50 million for those deals, and they have exactly 180 days to close. No extensions on that. It is a hard 180 days. And if you can't make it, the money goes to someone else.
150 days, in 150 days, the issuer owes the fees.
So there are
Lock in.
fees kind of built into the program, just to really what they're there is to ensure that the developer is still moving forward with these transactions. They're just sitting on the cap waiting for something to happen. So they do have to kind of pay a fee at the 35th day of the reservation. And then they also pay a fee, or they are required to pay a fee if they hold the reservation for more than 150 days. They're not large fees. It's typically between $2,000 to $4,000 that's due at the 35 day, and then roughly 4 to maybe 8-ish due at the 150 day. But for at the bottom there, Texas, for Austin, you are in region 7. For you guys, we received just over $57 million, almost $58 million for the regional allocation. Yes.
Could you define Region 7? What is in it exactly?
Wow.
Let me tell you why, because we serve the county.
Right.
And so we have previously talked about this, but not in a rigorous way. When we support an allocation, because there is a limit, we perceive that there's a potential trade-off. And so we want to make sure we don't disappoint our appointers in terms of the quality of the things that we provide the conduit. We also don't want to create a beef between Travis and other members of the region through our lack of rigor. So it seems like
Think of Travis County and then every county touching it.
oh,
How far
Okay.
into this come? All
oh,
completely hazy.
so Hayes.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
a county by
Flip out.
county region.
Willie-
Okay.
So it's Wilmington, Lee, Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Blanco, Llano's in 7, Llano, and Vernon.
And Fayette.
There is no policy,
Beyond what it touches.
and there is no policy or standard that we know that the court has given us.
No, and I will say tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, look at the regions and the applications that come in. I mean, the preponderance are gonna be urban areas. These deals, is it still true, guys, that bond deals often have to be quite large to pencil, or has that changed?
Yes and no. I mean, for the majority of the deals, they have gotten bigger over the last probably 5 years. You're seeing more 40 to $50 million deals. 7, 8 years ago, most of them were around 20.
But I would say usually a bond deal is at least close to 200 units. Up to, we're seeing them
here,
up to
yes.
300. And so I just mean, we're all competing, but I don't know, and it's scarce, right? There are 13 regions in the state,
Yes.
yes? So we're one of 13 regions. We can look, but I think there's a sense of competing for bond cap across, but I don't get the sense that there's been much sort of policy discussion between the areas, especially because there is an HFC that is a multi-county capital area,
Mhm.
which is where Andrea Shields went.
Mhm.
That is multi-county, and I don't know if it's primarily Region 13, but
The region 7. They're all.
7, sorry,
They're-
yes,
Just all their counties are region 7.
So it's us and capital area are region sevens.
And Travis County HFC,
Right.
Austin HFC.
All the
Yeah.
Travis County 394s plus
Yes,
Miss Shields are the region 7 players. And that's 57 million.
yes.
So when we induce 30 million, we're saying we'll take half of that for 2024.
Well, through the regional allocation, there
Oh, the
are
regional
Yeah.
allocation.
collapses that I was gonna get into.
Yeah.
Ah,
So yeah, from the regional amount, you're unlikely to,
okay. I
your
was like,
chances are
wait a
pretty small.
second. All right.
So-
Thank you.
Yes. So, next slide. So so the private activity bond, so there's regions and then there's also subceilings. So first, let's get into what the subceilings mean, and I'll get into the regions. and
Yes.
Get into the
This
collapse.
is why we
Yeah,
wanted
yes.
this. Excellent.
So so of that $3.8 billion, sorry, that is available for the state of Texas, it's divvied out into 5 separate subceilings. And these subceilings, think of them as different buckets for different uses of money. So subceiling 1 is for single family. So that's for typically TDHCA and TSHAC are the main issuers here
Yeah.
because they have statewide jurisdiction. So they can get a lower bond rate because they're able to kind of reach more people with those funds. So they take about 95% of that $1.2 billion in subceiling 1. 2 goes to state voted issues. This is the only issuer is the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and they use about half of that. Small, like the subceiling 3 is for industrial development bonds. They're limited to $10 million on their maximum bond amount. Don't have a lot of money there. Don't have a lot of usage there. There's maybe been 3 in the last probably 5 years that have used funds. Then we get in subceiling 4, and that is for housing, but it splits further between TDHCA and TSHAC. They get their own kind of allocation from that they use. And then,
TSHAC is Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation. They're headquartered here, but also an HFC formally.
maybe a long time
think
ago.
so.
That was well before my time.
I don't, it may be.
Yeah,
And they are, but
think
they've
so.
always been a corporation made on behalf of the states.
Yes.
And TDHCA, so they have, Texas wide jurisdiction for their bond transactions. They cannot act as general partner though in their transactions. So a lot of times what they have to do is partner with a local PFC or housing authority or HFC. We've actually done a couple deals where TDHCA has been the issuer and the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation was their partner. And then you get into subceiling 4 with the local HFC, so that's where you guys are.
Mhm.
And then there is the subceiling 5, which is kind of the catch-all for everyone else. The PFCs fall under this subceiling. The student loans not issued by the state fall under there, and they get a large chunk of funds as well. For the subceiling 4 local HFCs, that's where we get into the regions. So there's 4 main regions that are utilized, and those are the urban areas. It's region 7 is Austin, region 3 is Dallas, region 6 is Houston, and region 9 is San Antonio. Those are the more active users. I would actually have So Region 7 this year for the lottery had 21 applications. Dallas region had 20 applications. Houston had about 17. So as stated on the previous slide, we had about 57 million. That was enough to do 0 deals in the regional collapse because of the order of the applications. First application was $60 million. Since it was not enough, there was not enough in the region, it could not receive a reservation. What happens next, though, is we have these collapses that occur. I think is on the next slide, or I might have removed this slide. Nope, that's priorities. So regional collapse. Actually, Kevin, can we
Might be the
skip a
next
couple slides? If you can go down to slide 12. Slide 13. There we go. So this is the timeline of the PAB.
Ah, good. Yes, this is so helpful.
So basically,
I mean, it's.
I think I want a hard copy of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, great,
Oh, yay.
nice.
This is so much easier for me to read. Thank you.
Voila, please take one.
so through the program year, we basically, you apply in October, a lottery occurs in November that sets the order,
The order of,
the applications.
so you as a developer have your app in October.
Yes,
Hmm?
yes.
I know, but didn't ours, like, for example, Blue Ridge just submitted?
Blue Ridge submitted in the lottery. Well, that's
Comes later, right?
so the application period for the bond review board is statutorily October 5th to October 20th. If you'd
Okay.
like to participate in the law,
Yes.
an application can be submitted anytime after that.
Yeah.
However, you are after every application that's already been gone through the
Yeah.
lottery, and you are served kind of first come, first served.
Yeah.
So it's in the order of application. The way that Blue Ridge was able to reapply is we had carry forward that was designated to the HFC, and that means you have PAB funds that are allocated just to you for your projects. So we had $50 million available and no applications in line. So we were able to reapply with Blue Ridge and they immediately received a reservation. So you can do that throughout the program.
Okay.
But if we want to play the game well, we basically want to make sure, and obviously the developers know this since they're
Right.
developers, but we want to make sure we're talking to everybody with the goal of getting our applications in October 5th and 20th. So if we have an initiative or a developer reporting or what have you, this is the key sort of, we're getting married but on this date. And so know that we want to do something, so, and know that they will be submitting that.
They are aware.
Yeah, they are aware.
They are.
So will it be typical that we would have something of a rush or a press of applications
Yes,
August, September? Okay.
yes,
Okay.
even into October by the
Okay.
lazy
Okay.
developers.
So if you have a HFC that wants to be thoughtful about being a compelling partner during that period, what is the appropriate lever for them to see from a policy or operational point of view in that period, as they're sort of getting ready to submit an application?
I mean, being available for a board meeting, ensuring that you have a quorum
Mhm.
at your board meeting. That's been an issue for smaller HFCs is they call a board meeting and 2 board members show up, but we need 5 for a quorum or 3 for a quorum.
Mhm.
So ensuring that you can adequately induce their transactions and so they can make application to the bond board at that time. Because that inducement that's the main thing they need from the HFC in order to apply is to be induced.
So we have to convey as a board, hey, we know it's inducement season, we're ready.
Yeah.
At least at a minimum, convey that sense of confidence. Okay.
And there's also been a couple of boards that have, they received application, late. They got the developer made application on October 10th.
Mhm.
Hey, we have 10 days to get this thing done. We need to get a board meeting called. We need to get, Cliff will need to review, I'll need to review, the resolution will be drafted. And we'll have to move quickly and just being open to move quickly during that time and have a called board meeting. It doesn't come up a lot. I mean, and you can be staunch that, hey, we're not going to do that, bend over backwards, but it's typically if it's a project that you like. if it's in an area that you really want to be involved in, then a lot of HFCs have done that in the past.
So in theory, we would have like, if we were super aggressive, we would have our specially called October 19th inducement meeting for any last second inducements we would want to come.
I mean, we would know ahead of time.
We would hopefully, but that's the directional understanding for us to take away is October is very important to our potential partners. So we want to make sure that we're ready for any last second.
Hopefully September,
Hopefully
but
Hopefully
yeah,
September.
yeah. I mean, it is interesting, so we'll talk later about calendar, but it could mean that right now we are sort of headed toward a cadence of work session and voting session each once a month. That in that month, maybe they're both voting sessions just for deals, right? So that, okay.
Yes, and that actually, that's a good idea, just having a
Yeah.
voting session just for deals, just
Right.
to kind of streamline the agenda.
Well, or they're both,
And-
like twice of that month.
Right, and again, like I said, the inducement is the main thing that developers are looking for. They just really want to ensure that they can just make application. But so on the calendar here, really what I wanted to kind of show was March local collapse. So that is the 13 regions, they get their own little funds, and if it's a underutilized region that's kind of in rural Texas, say up in the Panhandle doesn't use a lot, down in the valley, they don't use a lot, so El Paso.
Really? Oh, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I have clients there, they're upset about it, believe me.
Oh, dude, that's heartbreaking. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But so if there's any funds that's left over, they would go into a general pool and then all the
and then we
applications
can
that are
come
in
in.
the HFCs. Stay in the
Okay.
same order of lottery, and then
I'm
they.
just having that.
That's how we got
that-
Blue Ridge.
that-
No, that's how we got, I feel like we just did one that took advantage of a collapse, no? No, okay, forget
Did
it. All right.
Dolphin get August collapse?
No,
last
but
year?
we might hear,
You don't, I'm so sorry to have to reel it.
but they might trickle in after March. You might get like, okay, somebody we induced last year for the, likely for the lottery. Eventually they tell us, oh, we got our reservation.
Yep.
Over time.
Okay, we
So-
don't, there's nothing we need to do March first.
No, there's nothing,
The
there's
real-
no action on, your deals are already in line, developers are watching, I'm watching them.
And there's nothing entrepreneurial we could do.
And there's no,
It's sort of-
we're waiting on the state process to move along at this point.
There's
Okay.
nothing entrepreneurial we could do after March 1st, when those funds are collectivized.
No.
Nothing. I mean, developers could.
It's like being on the wait list in
You're-
college.
You're on,
Correct.
yes, you're on the wait list for a college.
And who knows what happens? Who knows what happens?
It's just a transactional thing that happens.
It's a transition thing that
Okay.
happens
Okay.
inside the states,
Okay.
so the funds become available to the deals that are already in line.
Do you monitor that?
Yes,
Okay.
And
was
just,
we were able to get 5 transactions reserved at the March collapse. I think roughly $180 million became available just through the underutilized region, so it's helpful.
Yeah.
And it kind of, for me and Cliff as well, it kind of spaces the program out. 'Cause there's tranches of reservations that you start working on in January, and then you're kind of moving forward on those, and you get a few new ones in March, and you kind of move forward on those, and then deals have those 180-day clocks. They either close in June or early July, or they end up having to give their allocation back, their volume cap back, and then new deals start kind of then. So we have kind of tranches of reservations and applications that are being moved.
and just because we went a little quickly, the order after lottery. Or during lottery, I get a little confused, is based roughly on different priorities, which are basically about depth of affordability.
There.
So the deeper your
You go up in
affordability, the higher you will be in that sort of either wait list or whatever, yeah.
So yeah, there's several priorities that you apply for, and I don't want to go through these specifically, but the general thrust is yes, the deeper affordability, the better priority you have. So you kind of, what they do at the lottery is they'll lump all the applications that are submitted as a 1, A, B, C, or D together. And then they compete each other with the randomly drawn number. And I mean, it is an actual lottery. It is a retired Cash 5 bingo machine with ping pong balls and everything.
Can we go see it?
Yes, it is. It is open to the public. It's
We're gonna
typically
have a
the
board meeting in the
the
lobby.
first
100%.
Thursday in November.
Literally,
Yeah.
Literally ping pong ball.
I will,
Yeah.
I have pictures. I will pull them up.
Find us on our website.
I wanna go. All right.
Alive,
So I also warn you, it's very, very loud, because it is I mean, those cash five machines have a huge compressor, and I mean, they are loud.
Wow. That's super cool. I wanna just ask you a question about
We're
this.
looking for something in this presentation.
Yeah, we could have
That's it.
started with that. For us who are trying to be entrepreneurial and assertive and get more stuff done for the people of Travis County. Is there a way that are there levers that we have as we start hearing from partners or we see potential partners forming on this allocation where we would say we will adjust our terms or we will co-participate or we'll do X, Y, or Z to increase our chances of success in the lottery? Is there anybody that does that, or have you seen anything like that?
No, yes and no. So
Okay.
the tricky part with kind of doing these deeper affordabilities is, I mean, even though you're getting tax credit funds in, when you limit deeper into doing the half at 50, half at 60 for a priority 1A, you're still limiting the income of the transaction overall.
Of course.
So what happened 2 years ago is we had roughly 200 applications come in through the bond review board for the lottery. I would say half of those were one of these priority 1 deals. Maybe 4 of them got to close, because that was right when rates started going up during the summer. Deals became extremely unfeasible at those affordability levels, and developers had to rethink, well, maybe we should go in as a priority 2 and not do the 50% units, but just try to get this deal done.
Sure.
So there are some issues when they overestimated their ability to provide those affordable units, and they just weren't able to make it to close on those. But technically, yes, you can request, deeper affordability on any project that you do, and you kind of adjust how your fees would work. That is,
Say we're only, we could say, I don't know.
We could say, yeah,
We're
we
only
could.
inducing priority 1 deals.
you could
I
say
mean,
that.
we could say that,
We
whether
could
we
say-
want to or not.
and we will find a way to make it work with you, we could say.
Yes.
And I'm not saying we want to, I'm saying,
Or have enough
I
money.
wanna understand we're trying to understand our
Yeah.
levers.
But-
And so I'm like, okay, what's the lever here? And the lever is,
I want to also kind of say that, I mean, when you do a priority 1, really what you're doing is you're just getting first in line, and historically, the productivity bond program, there's a lot of recycling that goes on through it. I mean, everyone that gets their reservations first, that doesn't mean they're actually going to close first. That means that they might give their funds back. Because I mean, so far, I would say we're only in middle of April of the reservations that were or the applications that were reached.
yeah,
About half of them either said we can no longer do this deal, or they tried and they've already started giving their funds back.
but if you're in priority 1C and you give up 50 million back, it goes to the priority 0 or the priority 1A. That is in the slot that didn't get funded. Like a cascade, it goes back to the cascade from the top, no?
Well, I mean, the ones from the top have already been reached, so the 1Cs would have to wait on the 1A, or no, well, I mean, they're the 1A, sorry, the ones are all one group. But say if you get down, right now, we're reserving priority 2s in a lot of the regions, because the priority 1s have already either
So would it
currently
be-
reserved, or they've deemed they cannot move forward with this project.
So during lottery, would it be typical that all 1A deals get a reservation?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't even get that far. Everybody is sort of waiting. Okay. I have a question. So priority 2 and priority 0 say must have received 4% tax credits. So is it accurate that someone could come in and apply for bonds and not pair it with tax credits?
Yes,
Is that unusual?
yes.
Because they're
Very.
leaving it on the table, and why would
Yes.
you do that? Okay.
So we had one transaction we discussed in East Texas, this spring or last October, I don't think.
Say-
In Lufkin, perhaps?
It was not Lufkin.
Oh,
It was Tyler.
See,
Uh,
there are other East Texas.
But the developer wanted to
Those-
access the
Those
bond
yahoos, yeah.
just to have the lower interest rates.
Yeah.
That was the first time I'd ever heard of anyone wanting to come through the PAT program without accessing light tech
Okay.
credits.
okay. so it's-
My boss Tim said, well, that used to happen a little bit more in the mid-90s. There would be developers.
Strategic has a few of those deals, Marquee at Shoreline. It's either 2 or 3, and those were done in I think late 2000, early 2010s. There was enough volume capped and, developer, groups wanted to just get the taxes and financing, they were big, like TIAA, big funds.
Yeah,
That own the projects, and they wanted the tax and financing and locked in long term,
you're saying in our current portfolio, we have properties that are
that are not.
PAB but not light tax?
Right.
Which
Or
ones?
Well, Marquis and Shoreline.
that are
So we don't have an ownership.
Or was
Uh,
that? I can. I'll
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
find out here in a second.
No, that, cause that, I don't, I agree, you know better, I'm saying. The way we discussed our properties is that they all had 4 or 9% tax credits. But.
Yeah, and
That would be
ownership.
really novel and interesting.
Okay.
Okay. Back to the presenter, so sorry. I hope you see how useful this is, and it's been delayed, and so some of the excitement is about having the expert finally talk about it.
And let me say also for board members, like, and everyone. This stuff takes multiple times, right, going over usually to get to understanding, so just know that we'll keep, sort of retouching on this stuff. This time, we're kind of trying to do a broad overview, but just patience, endurance, persistence.
Kevin, if we go back to, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the priorities, they do get kind of technical. If we go back to that, that's the side with the blue, yes. So I got to the March collapse in which all the regions kind of collapsed into one pool. What then happens next, is June 1st, you guys this wouldn't apply, unfortunately, y'all, your income levels in Travis County are too high to qualify for a 1D. This is if it's a rural area and their incomes are lower than the states, they get a boost up. So that this occurs kind of in rural states or rural areas of the state. August 7th is the single family collapse. So that's really what this does to the HFCs and multifamily is it allocates that $1.2 billion where TDHCA and TSHAC can then come in for those large funds. I get so many calls around August 1st from developers looking forward to the August 15th collapse, forgetting there's an August 7th collapse. And they see, oh, there's almost, $900 million available in the subceiling. We're going to get so many reservations. Like, well, no, TDHCA is going to take that 900 million. It's not going to go to us in multifamily housing. Then the big collapse that really everyone kind of gears up for is the August 15th collapse. And this is anything remaining in any of the other subceilings. So for HFCs, we'll give back typically $5 to $7 million. It's just not enough to do a full reservation. The bigger funds come from that subceiling 2, where only higher education coordinating board can use, and they typically do one issuance a year, around $100 to $150 million. So it's almost $200 million that goes back from just that subceiling. Historically, this collapse is about, I'd say, $250 up to $400 million becomes available, and it's almost all goes to housing projects at that point.
So August 15th is like Hauser Christmas, because
Yes.
it's sort of where it all.
That
comes
in
going
late
back.
July, which Cliff will talk about.
Okay,
I guess we're already talking about 9%.
okay, got it.
So implications here again for us. These are deals that we've induced where we've, are already in line. We could, if we have multiples, we might likely see them reserved at that date if they haven't been already. And then, and this is true all year long, but the 180-day clock starts. They have to close the deal by then. So conceivably, if we had, say I don't know how, we had 6 inducements and deals and 4 of them, got their reservation in the August 15th collapse, then we collectively have sort of a rush or intense time to get to close.
Yes.
And because it's 180 days from, it's not 180 days from August 16th.
No,
It's
it's when
180 days from.
their reservation dates, which is basically when it goes active.
Whenever it gets pulled from the wait list.
It's a response to the application.
Okay,
So like, we were talking about the wait list, like for college, so you have your application waiting. Once you get the call, hey, you have your funds available, you are now on the clock, is basically what we say.
They would say you have 180 days.
And you
to
now
accept.
have 180 days to close.
And sign your paper.
And that's not business days, that is calendar days. I mean, if it falls on if your 180th day falls on a Sunday, you have to close by that Friday, so you really have 178 days.
okay.
Holidays, you don't count. So I mean, that or holidays count in the time period. No extensions for those either. The only time I've ever seen an extension was once. And it has to be essentially an act of God emergency declared by the state of Texas. We had the ice from 2 years ago. We had the governor could declare a state of emergency. FedEx shut down everything for their routes so that the bond packet could not be delivered to the BRB. So we missed a closing date. They granted an exception of 3 days. And that's the longest that's the only extension they can give. And we were able to file and we got to closing, but that's the only time I've ever seen an extension.
Diana, I think it's fair to say staff will show a fidelity to these dates and will notify board. This is not something that we need to necessarily.
Correct.
This is for.
That's
staff
right.
to
I mean,
really
we will
vigilant
be
about, yeah.
watching. I mean, I think the question will be, so we've already talked about probably a rush of applications because, notice that the application period and we've now just reserved a bunch of deals overlap. So we might have a rush of applications, which the board would be considering August, September, maybe October. But in August, we would, potentially get deals reserved or, selected if they haven't already been. And that is mostly hard work for these folks. And, my pen, like signing things, but, and reviewing documents, et cetera, but it's.
But let's go to the next slide, because this one,
Yeah.
this kind of shows the timeline of a transaction, and there's a couple of points here that are specific to the HFC and the pool. And these are really when you're going to see these transactions. So this is what's poignant for y'all. So we have really, when you start this up, the developer, they'll kind of submit an application to either an HFC or PFC, deciding on, which route do we want to go. And in Austin, we have, like you said, several kind of, there's the Austin HFC, Strategic, Travis County, and there's also a few PFCs. Most developers will kind of pick their path between an HFC and a PFC. And the difference being for the PAB program, they're run under separate subceilings. So there's that subceiling 5 for the PFCs, subceiling 4 for the HFCs. Some developers believe you get a better path to a reservation and through the PFCs, you use the HFCs. There's also different government codes that regulate both. Some developers prefer the, we'll say, leniency of the 392, which is the PFC transaction, especially for the partnership side. I prefer myself, the HFC side is it's a little more stringent. It's a little more detailed on how to move forward with these. So they kind of pick their path, submit an application. Myself, Keith, Diana, and Cliff, we would review the application to ensure it's in order. And then at that point, we would bring it to the board for an inducement. That's what we did a couple weeks ago, for last month, actually now, for those Ellington deals. And that's when y'all get to kind of look at the transactions, decide if this is something that you're interested in. And really, an inducement, again, it's not an obligation of the HFC, it's really the first step. But I think at that point, I would kind of look at as a board member possibly is just, location. Is this somewhere we want to have a project? Is this developer someone we've worked with before? Do we have an standing relationship? Do I trust them? I mean, is it someone that's kind of weird? Is it not a usual developer? Is this someone that's new? Is this their first time? I mean, those are kind of concerns you could look at, just the affordability levels that they're looking to bring in. Just the tertiary, just kind of looking at the financials of their pro formas. I mean, since they had to induce so early before closing these bond transactions, it's kind of hard to review the actual performance that because they're not, I would consider those anywhere near final. They're going to change a million times, but just still proofing up that they can build a viable project to the board is essential. At that point, we get the inducement and then it is submitted to application. Once they kind of basically they'll wait in line, and that could be a couple of weeks, it could be a few months. At that point, if they get their reservation, that's when we start working in earnest on it, for myself and Cliff and everyone else on the staff side. And they will kind of pick a plan of finance with how they actually want to move forward. Are they going to engage, which equity partners are they going to engage, the lenders? And they'll start kind of reviewing and doing their own underwriting on the projects as well to ensure, because they're the ones that are with the most financial risk in these, since they are buying tax credits for millions of dollars. At that point, there's another If it is a partnership deal, like you would typically those would be brought back to the board to look at again to approve an MOU to just kind of go through the business terms and understand just this is going to be a long-term relationship with this developer at this point. We're not just acting as a conduit issuer, we're acting as a general partner with them. So that's just another kind of opportunity to see the transaction on the board level. If that is approved and move forward, we would start holding TEFRA hearings. TDHCA would begin their underwriting process and award LIHTC credits.
Tefra mean.
Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of nineteen
Can you say
eighty-two.
that again?
Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982.
Our TEFRA hearing is the county, right? The county has to, the commissioner's court has to have a,
Well, it's up to the county. The county can hold the hearing or strategic can hold the hearing, but the approval needs to come from either the commissioner's court or the county judge. A lot of jurisdictions, the county judge or even the mayor will sign those approval certificates, but here the judge requires it to go to the full commissioner's court as an agenda.
and so my experience has been very perfunctory. It just adds time.
Yes, but we work it in with the rest of the calendar, so it really doesn't cost the deal any time, but it'll take to go through all the county. It probably takes 6 weeks to get it all done. So you can't wake up 3 days before closing and go, dang, we need a TEFRA.
It's just the only, I guess what I'm saying is this one is different and has always struck me as different because we are at the mercy of the court. Whereas the rest of the stuff, we can be disciplined and be like, move it, Keith. Or you say, with that, it's up to judge, court.
I mean, it's up to us to get it in front of them, but yes, at some point their process takes over and they have to do it.
Okay, got it.
I have a question. So I'm guessing you'll talk about resolutions of no objection, which is a tax credit thing. But for TEFRA hearings, I mean, these times that this comes before the court in any fashion, right? In my experience, if there's opposition, if the neighbors are like, no, we don't want this, that's, it might draw that. I haven't seen that as much with TEFRA hearings, so I don't know. But what is your experience with that? These projects often get a little less opposition than 9% deals because they're not as deeply affordable. People are prejudiced, but is that a time when we might see?
It's possible. I've been doing this since 1989. I've had 2 people or 2 TEFRA hearings that we ever had anybody from the
Wow.
public show up. One of them was at Travis County, and it was a guy that spoke about how nice I was.
Oh.
I'd helped him on something about a year before, which was, and then the other one was in Bolt Springs. The property was across the street from another apartment complex, and that owner did not want the competition, and so he busted in. It was several miles from the complex, and they busted in residents who were willing to come and speak against it. Those are the only 2 times that I've ever.
That's helpful.
Sometimes I get them down at TDHC.
They do, yes, THCA deals will get them. I don't do THCA deals though, but for my experience, I've only had one TEFRA that got pretty heated. It was in Fredericksburg, and the developer did, instead of community outreach, he came in and went to City Hall and essentially told City Hall, I'm gonna do what I want and you can't tell me otherwise. Not smart. He was from New York. It was his first time doing a transaction in Texas.
When was it?
2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had the TEFRA, it was a phone-in TEFRA, and there was 30 people on the line. And they spoke very harshly about the deal. So harshly that we didn't want to take the TEFRA for approval. Because no one would approve it at the county level or the mayor level, though the developer pushed anyway, feeling that it would still be signed. So he said it wouldn't be signed by the mayor, but he would talk with the county. That TEFRA was not signed. So that deal did die, but it's really more, I mean, for those kind of deals, you need to have some type of community outreach. The bigger issue was there was a senior community directly behind the property. And they just really had no education on what was going on. What is being built here? We don't understand what this is. We just don't want it. And just a little more community involvement probably would have gone a long way with that transaction.
Okay. Tefra.
Temperatures.
uh,
I mean, that's my one example.
Yeah.
I've done hundreds of other Tefras and if
Oh,
anyone
that-
shows up, it's usually just so what is this exactly? Oh, okay, you're building that. Okay.
Okay. Proceed.
And then I guess the last time that the board would really see a transaction is for final document approval. That's when, you know, basically the bond documents have been vetted by staff, the partnership documents, if it's a partnership, have been vetted by staff and the other external parties as well. And we would bring that for final approval to the board. These usually occur, I would say, within a month-ish before closing, sometimes shorter, depending on.
Probably 2 to 4 weeks is ideal.
And then hopefully the bond deal closes. But typically there's three main times that the board would be active in seeing a transaction. Next slide. There's only like 2 more, promise. I know I've gone way over my 15 minutes tonight, I'm sorry. So this is just the regulatory bodies. I just wanted to kind of just highlight that, I mean, there are, you know, governmental agencies that are looking at these transactions as well. I mean, the Bond Review Board they administer the volume cap for the states. They do collect data on local and conduit debts. They have no oversight really onto the actual bond issuance, but really more for the private activity bond cap. The Attorney General does have approval and review over all bond issuances in the state of Texas.
Oh, like with Hudson Transit Partnership, if the Attorney General is like, I don't want to let you get these bonds, you
Not
don't.
exactly, but
The- For the process that we go through, their only role is to review the transcript and submit it and make sure everything's done according to the appropriate statute.
Just
It's
transactional
really
accuracy.
administrative, it's not quality.
Okay, great, got it. I understand what you're saying. Woo, thank you.
and then of course you have the SEC is you know, oversight for all bond issuances through for you know MSRB rules, municipal security rulemaking. So the next slide is really, I just wanted to kind of show just the external partners that are in these transactions. You know, of course, there is the HFC issuer, and then you guys have your counsel and advisors with me and Cliff. There's also, you know, a equity provider. This is the group that's going to purchase the tax credits from TDHCA when they come through, and they also have a counsel that's involved. There is, you know, the lender that's going to go through and they'll act as either a construction lender or a bridge lender or a permanent loan lender as well, and they all have their counsel as well. If it's a public and offered deal, there's an underwriter and they also have a counsel. There is a bond trustee that would hold the funds, and then they also have a counsel, and then there's the developer and their counsel. When we work through these deals, I mean, it's groups of 40, 50 people sometimes that are either on these conference calls and reviewing and moving through these transactions. So it literally takes a village to get these through. And then the last slide here is really just kind of showing the flow of a transaction. And just how we kind of got into.
Thank you.
Yes. So essentially, let's think of it as, you know, the HFC is, you know, going to issue bonds, and they would go through an underwriter who would then sell these bonds to investors or bondholders. The funds of the purchase would then go through to the trustee who would hold the money. So think of it like I need $20 and I don't know anyone can give me $20, but Cliff might know somebody and he's going to ask Diana to give me $20. But she doesn't trust me to hold my money. So I'm going to have my friend Keith hold my money for me because he's trustworthy from Tyler. And then really those funds are then kind of dispersed out into the developer or borrower to do the project. And when they're kind of bringing funds back in, they give Keith the money instead of me because they don't trust me.
Well, the reason they don't trust you is because those documents have safe holds and they require Keith to be worth, have equity.
Well, he has to have
$100
equity,
million
yes.
Or some standard, so he's not gonna run away with your $20.
Right.
So does the loan from the trustee to the developer look like, you know, is it a bank loan largely in terms of the documents, the loan documents, the process for draws, all that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Okay,
I mean, the trustee is essentially, I mean, it's essentially a bank that's dispersing. funds.
Okay.
So, yeah, maybe Keith wasn't the best example.
An old banker.
But I mean, I don't want to dig too deep into the flow of funds on a bond transaction. It is a difficult kind of process, but that's really, I think that's my last slide. I think there's the disclaimer. We don't need to show that. I just have to proof up that I included it.
I have- but I have
But
I
I'm
have
sure there's
read
a
it
couple of questions.
and absorbed it. This was really excellent. We are a little bit over on this one, but this is the one that I think we knew the least about. And we've been curious for a bit. Any immediate questions or reaction before we ask our next presenter to get on the stand?
Just as we go into the next presentation, if there's a way to drill it down to what we're doing and to make it applicable to something we've actually reviewed or is currently in the pipeline.
Okay, I think we're ready to talk about tax credits then.
Okay. Thinking about Dan's comment. I'm figuring out how to-
As loud as possible, as loud as
I've not
possible,
heard anything.
Mr. Clerk.
wonder if I can
I'm
pull that
rethinking
wall.
the presentation based on Jan's last comment.
Dan, do you want to switch spots with me? You can sit next to Cliff.
I think everybody needs to hear.
Yeah, do we wanna, what, this is like,
Do you want a break?
I don't know if it's a break, but if people wanna grab food, how
Yeah.
about we just say, feel free to get up and grab
This is a
food
good moment.
whenever you are
Want to
hungry.
get some?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, I guess initially just, the tax credits program, is, there's voluminous information out there and there are basic conferences on tax credits that take 5 days. So, and this was 15 minutes. So this is a very, very, tip of the iceberg, presentation about tax credits, just in general, what they are, how they came to be and why you see them. In answer to your question or your statement a minute ago, Jan, really, strategic itself does not get involved in the tax credits. The developer makes the application on behalf of the partnership that you're going to be a part of and handles all of that. And it's just, I think Braxton mentioned it, it's just a way on a 4% deal, a 4% tax credit deal, approximately 30% of the financing will be in the form of equity from tax credit investor. Once they make it through the whole process, and then there's a separate one that's 9%, that generally will finance about 70% of a project, and you do the rest of it through debt. So there's those two type programs that we'll get into, but I guess I just want to make a point that really, from your own standpoint as a board, you know all this is going on in the background, in conjunction with the 4% bond deal that you do see a lot more of because you're actually issuing. But there's not a lot of hands-on things that you as the board or even staff will participate in with TDHCA. You just know what's going on, and so.
And they have to get their bond reservation to access the 4%.
For the 4%.
Yeah, yeah.
The 4% tax credits are automatic if you go through the administrative process once you have your bond allocation.
Okay.
Right, they call them it's the non-competitive side of the
As opposed to the 9%.
and those are very
Right.
competitive. Yes, I think it's really, they get competitive on the 4% side because of, there's not a lot of volume cap to go around. So it's, developers get confused on that as well. It's not competitive. Why can't I access my tax credits now? So you don't have your bond allocation. There's an order to it.
Oh, I like the size of that.
So when we were talking earlier in the week about what we thought would be important, we thought we ought to give you just a very little background on the program. The LIHTC is a low income housing tax credit, how the program works on a very basic level, some eligibility requirements, and what the reason and why this is important for affordable housing. So the background, the program was established in 1986 under the tax code. Was completely redone in 1986, and this was part of it. The goal was to incentivize the development and preservation of affordable rental housing. There really wasn't a good program like this prior, and it replaced some subsidy programs that weren't very efficient in this. So this did that. Okay, next slide. So the primary purpose is to encourage private investment in affordable housing. So with these deals, as opposed to what Section 8 or some other terms you might have heard, there's a lot of private money that is involved with the bondholders that purchase the bonds, with the tax credit investors that provide the equity. And so you're bringing in other sources of income in order to provide affordable housing. And the trade-off is that developers get tax credits on these deals and to build the housing. And those are then syndicated to very large funds generally that take the tax credits and sell them to companies that have income that they can offset with the tax credits. And the goal is just to increase the supply of quality affordable housing using the private capital. Next. So the key stakeholders in one of these deals, and it's a lot of the same people that were in Braxton's slide for who's involved. But so you have federal and state governments because of the tax credits. Well, there are some state tax credit programs, but I didn't get into those because they aren't used. They're used occasionally, but not terribly often on housing deals. But the federal and state government, developer, the investors, the syndicators, and that's really the people that we work with that are providing the equity. They put the money in and then syndicate the tax credits to the actual users, the companies that use them to offset their taxes. Property managers, low income tenants, all other stakeholders, not necessarily involved in the transaction, but they have a stake in how these go. Okay, the next slide. Hopefully this is big enough. So this is a very simplified tax credit flow chart, and you almost have to lay this over the one that Braxton provided because in a 4% deal, these are both going on at the same time. So on the top level, we have HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, comes up with the standards for affordability and some other requirements for these programs.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you, sir. And as you know, the taxes are generally regulated or administered by the Internal Revenue Service. So they come up with the way to allocate tax credits to the states based on population. And so the state will have so much tax credit authority to issue. And in Texas, the State Housing Finance Authority is TDHCA. So TDHCA, they award the tax credits, and that's who we apply for. So a developer will have a project that they want to finance through 4% bonds and tax credits, and they'll make an application to TDHCA, which once the developer gets through the whole process, that's who awards the tax credits. And then the developer will enter into generally done as a limited partnership agreement. Sometimes it's done as a limited liability company, where investors will be we call them investor limited partners, and they are allocated all the tax credits in the partnership agreement so that they can take those tax credits and make use of them. In exchange, they put in the equity, which again is approximately 30% of the project cost, and allows the developer to combine the equity with the bond revenue or the bond issuance money and build the project. So again, that's a pretty simplified flow chart, but that's essentially the players and how the money flows and how the regulations flow. Yes, sir.
Can we just revisit I'm gonna use the word capital stack, and I don't know if that's the right term.
Yeah.
But so there's equity and there's debt. And equity is typically 30% of a project's construction value. And in that 30%, what portion is LIHTC again?
Well, that's really LIHTC is the 30%.
It is the
Yeah,
30%.
yeah.
Developers will oftentimes have to put in monies either through guarantees or actual cash in the deal as well.
So if I was a LIHTC developer, I just get my equity from the State Housing and Finance Authority. There's no additional private supplement that's return
No,
thinking.
they put in money as well.
What percentage of the 30?
Depends on the size of the deal.
It's kinda hard to- I mean, I would say,
But single digits, less than single digits.
yeah, probably.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
It's a small percentage of
But here's another question.
Is that optional or set by law?
the,
Their amount of buy-in.
it's not set by law, but I think it's set by what a project needs.
Okay.
It's probably set by all the players involved that are want to make sure before a project starts, it's gonna have enough funding.
Sure.
The syndicate,
Yeah.
the syndicators, which, you know,
Sure.
are the ones giving the. And so another question is, would it be typical that between the cash that's coming out in through the tax credits, so that 30%, and the bond financing, that was enough to build the project? Or do they also have bank loans? I mean, is there a gap, you know?
There's often, almost every deal, there's a bridge loan, there's often soft money from.
Right.
And those are higher interest because they're riskier.
Depends, not.
Bridge loan would be.
Bridge loan would be, but some of the soft money is no interest or very low interest.
Go bonds might come in as soft money.
And then, I mean, the developer is also deferring some of their fees sometimes, so all the
Yeah,
time,
no,
they're
no,
deferring a
yeah.
portion of it,
Too
depends on
deep,
how
but just
much.
knowing what it takes to make the deal happen.
What helped me when I was kind of first starting out was understanding that the tax credits, so they're paid annually. And that was kind of what tripped me up when I first started working on deals 10 years ago. Well, why are they selling these to an investor? It's, well, they need these immediate funds up front. So the investors purchasing these, typically paying off in 5 to 6 tranches. Just kind of depending on however the partnership agreement is kind of worked out. There'll be a amount paid at closing, and then amount paid, say, at 25% project completion, another amount paid at 50%, and then 100%, and then at lease up. So they're bringing in funds earlier and earlier, and the advantage, I guess, to the investors is they're paying roughly, we'll say 90% on the dollar on these tax credits.
All right, let's keep.
Or let's
moving.
go, yeah.
Let's keep moving.
Next slide. So each year in Texas, TDHCA receives an allocation from the federal government based on our population. And then the governor's office, along with TDHCA,
The
established
qualified education plan.
a qualified allocation plan, and you can see why 15 minutes is not anywhere near enough to start talking about all the subjects under tax credits. But these are the rules under which TDHCA operates for this program.
They change annually.
And it is an annual plan. That is correct. And there's a lot that goes into to that process. And the IRS requires that the QAP prioritize projects that serve the lowest income tenants and ensure reliable or affordability for the longest periods. So the QAP talks about project location.
Yes.
Affordability levels, developer experience, and community impact. Again, most of that is relevant for 9% deals that are competitive, where TDHCA is grading are essentially grading the different applications. And
Scoring.
deciding which one is the best in a particular area, or which ones are the best in order to fund.
So I don't want to tie this up, but just recently was tracking one of those. That evaluation as a QAP establishes the criteria and reviews the applicant. Is it in a rank order of who applied first?
No, there's deadline and for the 9% competitive round.
For the
there's
9%, I'm talking,
deadlines, and everyone that gets their
it goes in the
application
same hopper,
right, and then they score them.
and the criteria is what elevates. That's news to me.
And it's usually, it can be often a point, you know,
Sure.
you even you have tiebreakers.
So percentage of, yeah, so they get very, very detailed.
Okay, I'll get back to you on that. Something didn't happen that way, okay.
Okay, then next slide. So developers of these projects secure tax credits by partnering with investors. Typically, they're very, very large companies that do this, and then they syndicate the tax credits. And as Braxton just talked about, they provide upfront financing for these projects, so they'll have 5 to 6 tranches during the course of construction to Lisa, where the money comes in, and then the tax credits are awarded after completion over a period of 10 years. And so at various times, the market for those tax credits can be, there've been times when it's been almost 100 cents on the dollar, and now I think probably in the 80s. So
I've seen some in the low 90s, but I mean, yeah, I think the lowest I saw in the last year is like 82 cents to the dollar.
So that difference can also create gaps that developers have to fill with either soft money or bridge loans or they try to be as creative as possible.
Soft money means effectively money you probably don't have to pay back. So either it's a grant, or often a government will say, we're giving you this, it's a loan, but often it has very low or 0% interest, and basically you only have to pay it back if you screw up and don't, if you screw up and don't do what you said you were going to. So I mean, in most cases, it's effectively a grant.
And then the last point, tax credits are just a dollar for dollar. The company buys these tax credits, and if they buy $100 worth of tax credits, they just complete it's $100 off of their taxes. It's $100 they don't have to pay to the government. So this is essentially the federal government helping to finance these affordable projects. Next slide. So when a developer builds and y'all participate in a project, there's regulatory requirements that have to be met. And generally, after a project is completed, TDHCA has a LURA or a land use restriction agreement that gets placed on the property that ensures that the project is operated with the right, I guess, income bands is the right, whatever the developer agreed to, whether it was 100% at 60 or whether they had some income averaging involved, whatever the developer agreed to in order to get the tax credits and work their way through the process, those requirements are put in the LURA, and it's recorded in the real property records. It's similar to a lien on the property that requires the project to operate according to how the developer applied and worked its way through the process. They have to report at least annually. I don't get too much into nuts and bolts after these are done, but they provide reports just to say yes, certifying that they're meeting all the requirements, and they're subject to audit and review to make sure that those are true, sir.
Yeah. I'm outside it's called post compliance through TDHCA, and they do have annual reports. There's also a couple of annual reports that actually we complete on behalf of our HFC clients. You'll get one of these in the summer, Keith and Diana, from us. It's really just a list of the LIHTC deals you've participated in that TDHCA wants to understand you're still involved in the transactions. But on your side, it's very little to do, but the developer's compliance is rather heavy. And because TDHCA, I mean, they take this is serious. I mean, we're talking about restricting rents to a certain level for, through the LURA for 15 for the bond LURA, and then again 30 years for the extended. So they are very, very on point on making sure compliance is met.
Okay, next slide.
Oh, question. Can you just, back on that slide?
Okay.
Can you name who's doing the periodic inspections?
The would be TDHCA,
It's civil servants at TDHC, as I understand it.
right? Employees
Yes.
of TDHCA.
Patricia Murphy
It's
used
never-
to head up
I know.
that program. Yeah.
It's never a subcontractor?
I'll be
I
honest,
don't think I've ever seen.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. That's all.
Okay, so again, there's 4% tax credits and 9% tax credits. 4% are the deals that y'all see primarily, combined with the tax exempt bonds. I believe he's got one 9% deal. It's Cambridge. That's the other
Right.
one. So you do have a little bit of experience as an organization with 9% tax credits, but not a lot. The 4% tax credits can be, you can do purchase and rehab of existing projects or new construction. All of which would need to be financed by taxes and bonds to get the 4% credits. Under the federal program, at least 50% of the funding has to be through tax exempt bond financing. And there's a new requirement in Texas. Not sure why it's not on the slide, but you cannot be over 55%. And in 2024, we've got to start making that certification at closing, that not only that the amount of taxes and bonds that are financing this project are going to be between 50 and 55%. That's going to have to be calculated by a tax credit account.
Could you explain for all of us as simply as possible why some are 9% and some are 4%?
Well, 9% I mean, my response to that is 9% is competitive, but is far better for a developer to do a 9% deal. The deals pencil better, they're easier to do, and they would prefer to do that, but there's only so much 9% that are available. And so the deals that can't score well or can't make the cut for a 9% deal will often come for 4%. So I think a developer normally starts thinking we're gonna do this as 9%.
It's more like, what does 9% mean? Where does it?
9% of.
Oh, 9% of the qualified
Basis.
Eligible basis.
eligible basis is how much tax credits they get. So $10 million.
It is a ridiculous, I mean, it's a weird calculation, and eventually you multiply it by either 9% or 4%. And so would have been so nice if they gave it an actual name and not just a percent name, but yeah.
And 9%, but the way I think the takeaway for us is 9% is easier money, better rate money.
Better money, not easier money, harder money,
Harder money, but it's
but a lot more of it.
For the,
Yeah.
once you get it.
Yeah.
And we only have one 9% deal in our portfolio. And it sounds like one of the things that you were messaging, and I think we understood, but I want to confirm. The 4% limit, the gatekeeper is that almost everybody wants to do the debt side, and the debt side has the lottery. Because the 4% aren't scored. It's just whomever's.
It's automatic once you get the bonds, yeah.
But I mean, there is a checklist you gotta go through, but yes, it's.
And is there more tax credit than? Is there a surplus of tax credits every year that if in theory you could line up your own debt? You could go and apply for tax credits without the debt? Or
The
is it
only way
safe?
to get 4% credits is through bonds.
You have to have the bonds in order
Okay.
to get the 4% tax credit. There's no way to apply.
This
for
is
tax
the
credit.
deal structure that.
That's the deal
okay,
structure.
got
Yeah.
it.
I mean, Claude, I wouldn't really agree that 9% are easier to pencil.
Okay, say more.
I
say
mean,
more.
they are typically they're smaller deals. Usually 4% in bond deals are looking at 200 units ish. I mean, for 9%, most of the ones I'm working on are around 100 units. And there's no bond financing with those, so you are getting a private loan to typically do them. And
taxable.
and a taxable loan. And really the HFC's participation in those, they would want to have a governmental partner that it's another box on the score, but you would also be providing a property tax exception. Is your main goal there, or your main reason for participating in 9% to help lower their costs?
And I haven't seen, I'm thinking, I always hate to say this, but I don't remember seeing a deal where Strategic or Travis County HFC's been approached to be partner on a 9% deal just to provide the tax.
The deal last year.
The Eastern.
No, it was with Sagebrush, Megan Lash. What was that deal? But I mean,
Okay, it happens, but it's not too common.
Yes, so one of the, all right. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, I think I was jumping over to the 9% side, the new construction and substantial, rehab, and the available tax credits are based on the region, and again, they are competitive, and you have to score and score the best in your region, or however many deals there are.
And in our region, still Region 7, the same regions apply. Typically, 1 to 3 deals get awarded every year. Is that accurate? So it's super competitive, like it's not like, you might see 10 projects. The amount per region is small enough that if you have a big deal that ranks number 1, maybe you get another. And remember, we're in there with Kyle and I think San Marcos and Georgetown maybe. So, there are other communities. We usually, Travis County usually gets, I would say, at least 1. But it's super, it's pretty
Not
rare.
only is it competitive, it's very competitive.
Yeah. Crazy competitive. And it makes people crazy.
So
And they sabotage each other's
They
applications.
sabotage each other.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
this is
So-
what I've been tracking.
Our path to volume. Our path to more probably does not go through 9%.
No, I mean, it's capped and there could be a scenario in which somebody said, look, yeah, we need the tax exemption to make it work. But so often these deals also are more competitive based on affordability, right?
Mhm.
They get additional points. To Braxton's point, because of that, sometimes, even though you're getting, 50 to 70% of your capital through the tax credits, your cash through the tax credits, you might still need money. If you are in the Austin city limits and you still need money for the deal and you can't afford to pay the debt, they're going to the city to ask for, again, these soft loans. And the city's gonna provide the tax credit exemption. So it just is less likely they'll come to us. But
Yeah.
outside of the city, you never know,
And the qualified allocation plans policy criteria doesn't touch 4% at all, really. In terms of the scoring criteria, because it's not scored, it's not competitive. Mhm.
No, it's not yet, but it is still covered just for the guidance of it, so the rules, yes, but no scoring.
Okay, so, property, again, this is, primarily, on the 9% deals, properties have to meet certain criteria regarding location, affordability, and some use restrictions. They must, be designated as affordable housing and comply with federal and state guidelines. Again, those will generally be set out in the LURA that is reported against the property to ensure that those, are, enforceable against the property. And so the tax credits are not redeemable until the project is finished and placed in service. I think Braxton was making the point that the money will come in during construction at certain periods. And then when the project is finished and they file certain forms with the IRS, becomes placed in service, and then the syndicators start using the tax credits to actually offset taxes. The next slide. Tenant income limits, generally, the properties that on the 4% side are 100% of the units at 60%. A few years ago, they did introduce this income averaging concept, and so as long as it averages at 100% at 60, you can get into some higher bands of income affordability and some lower bands. Again, as long as it averages 100% at 60. The limits vary depending on the location, because each, I guess, so there's the Austin area, which is, has a certain AMI or average median income. Dallas will have one, Houston, San Antonio, all the regions have a median income that's set by HUD every year. And so that varies. Travis County, one of the reasons we can pencil so many deals is because our AMI is one of the highest, certainly in the state. And so it's a lot easier to make the deals underwrite and for lenders and equity providers to want to do those transactions because the rents will support the debt. That's why you don't see a lot of these deals in the more rural areas because the AMI is lower and it's harder to underwrite. Next,
Harder to underwrite to make money,
well, or to just
Break
pay the
even.
debt. Yeah, not necessarily to.
right?
even.
with, with enough return.
Let's see, the affordability requirements, these properties have to maintain the affordability. The trade-off for the tax credits is affordability for 30 years. There's a 15-year initial compliance period and then a 15-year extended compliance period. The investors that are receiving the tax credits only really have to worry about the initial compliance period. Once they get through that 15 years, they don't have to worry about having their tax credits recaptured if the project fails to comply later. But the requirements are for generally 30 years. And not only is there income limits, the rents are based on the income amounts. And so 30% rents are, the rent can't be above 30% of someone of the income or the average median income for that particular unit set aside. Which means if just easy numbers, if the income limit was $5,000 a month for a particular income band or unit, then the rent could not be over $1,500. Couldn't be more. Like that's 30% of 5,000. So that's how that works.
So just to break it down into like everyday language, high AMIs, high annual median incomes like we experience in Travis County is not good news for low income people attempting to fold into affordable units, because units that are termed affordable at 60% might not even be within their reach.
Yes, yeah, because it's all calculated on that higher
Right.
the rents.
Yeah, it's just it's a lot of like, sort of labels being used without translating it into the language of lived experience, just trying to get back to that.
The next slide, is just compliance period. I think I've already covered that. So slide. And so just kind of in summary, the importance of affordable housing, and y'all know most of this, but tenants and tax credit properties pay no more than 30% of their income.
Well, actually, important distinction. They pay no more than 30% of the average income at that sort of income band. So you might be someone who is earning 55% of area median income, right? And be in a unit that's set aside for somebody at 60%.
And
Your
rent could
percentage,
still be the
correct. So you might be paying more than 30%, but it's sort of set upon the average. But does that make sense?
It's a definition of HUD, of what income burden is.
Yes, but I'm saying
might
you
be paying
still
more
might be
income
paying more, a
burden.
greater percentage of your
Your
income.
personal.
The rent is capped,
Yes.
but you still may, yeah.
Cliff, is this your last slide?
it is.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
do.
Okay,
Oh,
Dr.
I
Whitney.
want him to get through. Are we done?
I'm moving us ahead, so if you have a question.
I think Julio was telling me.
Oh,
Yeah, so-
he pulled the hook.
I'm not pulling the hook, I'm saying we're starting to go really long, so help me out, Brett. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, just on value, this is a values-based question. There isn't an answer to it. I just want to speak from my heart here about LIHTC deals and that the reason I asked the question about who are the inspectors and how much is TDHCA monitoring compliance and looking at accountability back to the experience of tenants in these light tech developments. Just trying to see, are there any other monitors, levers available to tenants other than what you just covered in terms of you didn't say how often the inspections were and who really reports back that the correct number of affordable units is there and how often that's monitored, but it's a value that we have as a board that tenants' experiences be good experiences and that there be recourse.
Well, I guess my response to that question is, on a 4% deal, where we're also the issuer of the tax exempt bonds, we put a regulatory agreement on the property, which is in addition to the tax credit or the TDHCA puts on the property. And we are strategic, can monitor the compliance with that. Generally, it just talks about meeting the requirements under the taxes of the 4% tax exempt bond program. But there are some qualitative. I know it's kind of fuzzy, but you have the right to audit those, make sure they're in compliance.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, Director Winnick, I think that I don't know it intimately, but TDHCA's compliance doesn't speak to significantly to the tenant experience. And we particularly with, I think, the change in staffing over not just the last 3 months, but since Robert Onion left. And in fact, so Keith has spent more time on development and less time on asset management. So we need to build out that function. And I think we do need to look at both. How do we look at, the quality of the building, et cetera, but have some way that we can measure tenant satisfaction. When we do surveys, not everyone will answer. It'll be, it's probably imperfect, but I think that helps us as we consider, doing future deals with different developers, how we approach them.
Appreciate that. To be continued then.
Absolutely. I think it should be central to our business model discussion, how we want to do the asset management, property management. And we know we need to do that. It's so important. We have to align it with our mission. If there are no further questions, then our external experts have concluded their presentations. And it is the sense of the chair that we will take a brief 180-second break. So that you may get refreshments. And the staff and our external experts are free to go, since the next sections will be internally facing. So just use your 180 seconds quickly and wisely.
Restrooms are to the corner around the left and just keep going. They'll be on your left-hand side.
I would just suggest, we talked a lot today. I would also suggest there's the different conferences around there, or that are in state. There's TAP coming up in July that'll definitely bring some information for you guys. Talfa as well. You can talk to your peers at other HFCs to see what they're doing and understand their experiences. NALFA is in 2 weeks in Las Vegas. If anyone wants to book a last minute trip to talk about national housing as well.
Thank you.
Don't.
Just called.
We
stack
will
one.
not be entertaining the board calendar item today.
Mhm.
Is the presenter for Robert's Rules ready to present?
I thought we were gonna do, that was gonna be our sacrificial lamb if we need to.
The presenter for nonviolent communication is ready, and that is me. So I wanted to briefly talk to you all a little bit about nonviolent communication. We are a little bit long, so I'm gonna adjust my remarks a little bit on the slide here. I wanted to, at the end of my little presentation conversation, have some pointers and shared language of how we will use nonviolent communication techniques as directors. And hopefully staff as well. So the first thing I wanted to, about the book is as a starting point. All of us are limited in time and some of us are limited in memory. So it's important that you know that page 231 has a very helpful one-page summary of how the methodology works, the NVC methodology works. And what I wanted to do briefly in our time together is go over the major components of nonviolent communication and work a little bit on the techniques together, and then talk about how we may develop a shared understanding of how we're going to use it. The goal is to create a communication style that allows us to respectfully do our work, especially when there are disagreements, needs for clarifications, the need for debate around expectations of each other, in a way that doesn't create toxicity. As some of you have remarked, and as I have found, these techniques are not only helpful in a workplace setting, they can be really helpful beyond it. And one last thing is, nonviolent communication does not mean that you have to be weak or rolled over or always agree to what others want. It's more a set of techniques for getting to an understanding of where everybody stands and what everybody needs that is less damaging to one's mental health and less toxic for all involved. All that clarified, let's talk about observing, which is the sort of beginning pillar. If you have the book available to you, I would ask you to open it to page 30. I find communicating observations in a nonviolent way the most challenging part, because it is not how we talk, but it is, in my mind, how you get onto the path of being able to communicate everything else in a way that is less toxic. On page 30, there's some really good examples, and I wanted to kind of go through them and then talk about a few of them as how they might apply to some of the work that we do. In the beginning of the table, you will see an example of an observation that has evaluation mixed in. It says, "You are too generous." And it gives you an example of an observation that we separate from evaluation. "When I see you give all your lunch money to others, I think you are being too generous." I like this one a lot because you have to get comfortable with sounding this way. It's not as direct as you would expect, but it forces you to sort of pause and talk in this way that calms you. I wanted to go to number 5, which is failure to be specific about reference. I mean, here's some very charged language. "Immigrants don't take care of their property." That is an example of an observation with evaluation mixed in. And here's a suggested alternative language. "I have not seen the immigrant family living at 1679 Ross shovel the snow on their sidewalk." As a member of a family of immigrants, I always found this one very peculiar but helpful, in that you could see someone who might have some anti-immigrant sentiment talk this way, but by making it so specific, it allows the conversation to really be tailored to a specific set of needs. I wanted to now ask you, if there have been any moments where, as we have provided feedback, you have observed that we do not use an observation style, but rather use more of a generic judgment. And if it has caused you to reflect on the need to alter how we communicate. I can think of many moments where in talking to staff or amongst ourselves, we have used either generalizations or judgment, and I find that taxing. I'm wondering if you have any reflections about how we have communicated. Friends, this sounds like you might want to say something. Yep.
Really?
Not really. Okay.
We had some level of toxicity in our meetings. But it was coming from like one individual,
Mhm,
they're not focusing
mhm.
the toxicity that's the big dive.
It's changed,
Was changed tremendously for the better.
you know.
Our meetings are so different. I don't need therapy out of my meetings people
Yeah,
or drink if I drink.
right. What, it's understandable to assign the behavior to one individual. What was the type of behavior that made it difficult?
Well,
How would you characterize?
it- judgmental and lacked empathy. Didn't care, maybe spoke too quickly to even think about what they were saying, how it would impact people. They just had a level of care that wasn't there. And it just made things a lot harder.
Director Wenning, are there any reflections that you have had about how at times we have used the judgmental language instead of observational language and how we communicate with the public staff or ourselves?
Well, I think we're all human beings and we come in with, different baggage. Some of the baggage that has been something I've had to put myself in check on is having suspicions about where somebody's coming from, or which is sort of a prejudgment. And trying to train myself to just listen to the content. On the other hand, there have been times in the past where the actual content was, hard to take and very blaming. So, I had to work on that as well. I think all of us slip. I slip all the time. So having one person off the board is helpful. Having staff changes is helpful. But it's the culture that we're trying to create and to allow ourselves to put each other in check as well. I think that we can all be allies to each other and notice if somebody's tipping over the edge. And try to return to these kinds of observational stances that are based on measurable, not suspicious or paranoid thoughts are helpful. We were challenged as a board by a visitor our last meeting.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. Go ahead.
What have you been thinking about?
Well, I have been thinking about how I wanted to communicate in the language of observation, but it is the hardest thing to also control your tone. Because you can be saying,
All the right things.
I can be saying, I am hearing that you were concerned. And I share your concern. And I hope we will work on the concern together. And it will not sound nonviolent, right? It will sound like intimidating or hurtful. And
Or as we were accused of dressing down. the individual.
yeah, the rest is on the individual, and it's sort of, well, I can, those emotions are correct. Everybody's the expert of how you make them feel. Right?
Correct.
That is
That's
correct.
a very important point.
And
How
so,
are we making people feel? Yeah.
and so it was hard for me to absorb that, because I tried to operationalize. Making observations in a collegial way,
Mhm.
but tone. Can really slip on this, and I think that is. You're getting at this sort of key takeaway on this and why you like using, given who I am, the immigrant example of. You can say the thing in a way that's so detached, but depending on your tone and how you say it. It doesn't matter that you're saying it the right way, it still sounds very hurtful. Director Reams, as we were going, I got to my moment to talk, so I wanted to see if you had any reflections of how. At times when we provide each other feedback or others, the public or staff, we use harshly evaluated language or tone. And kind of how it's impacted you, what you want to do about it in the future.
I would say at times it's probably changed. Speaking is to me. Feeling a certain way, some things have even cleared up certain things, it's like there was a little wonder, about something and. Incident happened, and so what I take from things is usually when something happens, I try to educate myself with it. I know it's kind of crazy, but good or bad, I try to find the good in it. So that I'm able to see this coming or be aware of it the next time and I'm introduced to it. So a lot of the language was new to me. And as I come more and more and more, I'm understanding, and it's weird because in a different setting, in a different meeting, if there's China attempting to even speak a language that's on this level, they are confusing themselves. And it's like, I wanted to become aware of higher dimensions, so to speak, in my city. And then being a resident just outright and not having the education to be able to be here or to see and go through and see what you guys are going through too. For me, it makes sense because I've always been a person that welcomes constructive criticism. So to me, I'm able to go, oh. And it puts me in my place and I go, oh, wow, okay, so you can't do that. Oh, but you can do this. So it just gave me a sense of, I'm gonna say belonging, because I think I belong, but a sense of awareness of how intelligent the conversation can be. Like you can go into a conversation and hear what they say, or you can go into it and be like, I'm not hearing that. I'm focused on what I want. But when you're open to hearing the other side and hearing if there's 3 or 4 sides, what they all have to say, it kind of shapes it differently for you to make you see that there's a different way that you could look at it and probably a different way to approach it, if that makes sense. I'm using all this too at home. So like I'm learning here and then I go home and I tell them, no, you can't do this. So it's like helping me build structure with my young adults. And I swear it's like it works. It really works if you just keep an open mind and just hear everyone out, no matter what they're barking or saying or yelling or fighting with you. It's good to hear and pick out keywords, key items. They could be angry, but through all that anger, you can hear maybe one thing that they're really serious about. They just don't know how to express themselves. Like they're not used to a different language. They're used to expressing themselves that way. And it's like, if they would give these folks, give them a few classes, maybe, you know what I mean? Like just development, mental development, maybe community development. so that they can be more aware, because I just feel like a lot of the language that I learned here, I just didn't know at first. I hadn't heard it. But once I did, it took me back to college, and I was like, oh, well, I read this here, and I remember that there, and it took me back to school. So maybe it could ruffle some feathers and some folks and make them want to learn more about it. You know? I love being here. It's amazing. It's just that I think I'm able to take the criticism and put it in a little box and then go home and write down what I'm, because I want to improve me.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm getting from all of the new languages. That's just, let's build on Lisa. Help Lisa build on Lisa so that Lisa can be the best she could be for the board, and the residents, and so on.
You said something that I think is so important, and before I segue to Ms. Gray and her reflection on observation for evaluation, I think you are very good at, in my opinion, I think you're very good at not immediately reacting under stress. And that is a really tough thing to master, because sometimes, especially when you're elevated as a leader, you feel like you've got to react when people say or do stuff. And you have oftentimes in the time that we've been on this together, sort of taken a moment and not immediately like push back or reacted or verbalized. And it's a really useful part of being able to get to the point of taking the time to observe or express or decide. Like non-reaction and the ability to sort of wait to react and be thoughtful in reaction is a very important part of all of this working. Because sometimes you, like in what I would I assess as my failure in nonviolently communicating with our visitor last session from Aka. Part of it is I, felt a need to defend our team and our work, and a need to take action, but that sort of impetus for reaction doesn't always lead to the allow nonviolent communication. So I wanted to express my appreciation for the fact that you oftentimes do not react and you take a moment and then you contribute. Since it was one of the things that you emphasize in the end of your statement. Ms. Gray, I know that you also got to read this material. I don't know if you have any, you have not been along with us for the journey, and some of its ups and downs as much. But I'm wondering if you wanted to contribute any reflection about observation versus evaluation, and some of the suggestions made in those chapters of the materials that we read.
I will say, I found book useful and challenging, when I was like, you want me to, right? Where I was like, that's gonna be tough. But Director Ream said something really important, which is called out in the book, which is empathy, right? And it's tough to practice, particularly if you feel attacked. But I think this, this first step of not only when we communicate, observing, sort of stating very specifically what you're seeing and leaving aside the judgment of it, right? You've done this and therefore you are X. But also, because this is hard and it's not a common way for people to communicate, when we receive that, like, of course, the natural reaction is defensiveness, and maybe now I'm coming for you too, is to be able to hear the part that is factual, right? And whether you discard or at least leave for later the part that is, judgment, to go, okay, that's a different thing, right? And I certainly, in my last job, Vala was there for. uh, There was, it was, it was the site of a lot of criticism, just because of the issue being so important and so hard. And I mean, it definitely didn't master it, but it kind of required getting to a place where the key is to not stop listening. Right, well, often when somebody attacks us or, makes a value judgment or we perceive that, exactly, we're done. And I too thought, about our last board meeting quite a bit and so anyway, I appreciate you bringing this to us and I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities for practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned that. I really.
I'm so glad everybody's using that word practice because it's not easy. It's, I heard about this in 2004 and have been using it as a tool, and some of you have been afflicted by it. But you still fall short because you're a human and even when you're trying to do it like a robot,
Yeah.
your tone or your nonverbal communication comes through. But yes, go ahead.
I just feel, I know staff wasn't there, but I just want to say, y'all have seen me lose it in an executive session. In which I was accused of criminal activity practically. And by a board member who's no longer here, but I just went off. I know I went off and, it just hit me so personally. I did go in therapy afterwards. And I've taught nonviolent intervention at the VA. I thought I had it all. And it was so timely to get this book and to go through especially the verbal ways, because I was mostly involved in preventing workplace violence outbursts and restraining people, but yeah, I mean, you could, in the room, you remember how loud it got?
I think what happened was, at that moment, it went around the room. The
It went around the
energies
room. It did.
circled from
There was a
board
moment.
member to board member
Yes.
and it hit Jan.
Yeah.
It was like, you say something and she just went with it. And if you weren't gonna say something, I believe multiple board
Yeah,
members were
we all
gonna
ended
say
up
something because that was
chiming in, but that was,
one of
it
the
was,
worst
you
things
can
I've
tell by the
experienced.
decibels, right? Like how loud it got. So I apologize. This is a official apology to everybody who was subjected to my outburst. There's no excuse. I was severely tested and I failed. So, don't think I'll be in that situation again, but I'm ready.
And if I can make a non-evaluative observation, so I would not say anyone failed. I think the organizations where things like that don't happen, in my experience, are places that proactively cultivate a culture and shared language and say a social contract with each other, promise each other that you don't get into those moments. It's sort of like it's sort of like a cultural seatbelt. It's like cars go fast and sometimes they crash, so maybe you need a seatbelt. It's sort of we're trying to build some seatbeltage,
Yeah.
right? And so that we don't get there. In part because the board will be ever changing and the challenges
Yes.
that we face. And so we want new people to come in and if they might think it's a little wacky, that we'll say, could you rephrase that in a non-evaluative observation? Here's some examples. But I think it will help us not ever go down that road. And it was very hard because, and this is a segue, to the next thing. We could not talk about our feelings, and our feelings were not good as a group. Even though a lot of us like each other and work well together, as a group, the feeling was bad. And so if you will indulge me, I wanted to point out a set of pages that's really valuable to me. And this is, if you have the book, it's pages 44 and 45. And I like these pages a lot because oftentimes in English, and how we talk in the present day, we don't have a lot of words for our feelings. And so we will, and for example, in Austin civic speak, a word that we use a lot is concerned. I am concerned. I am concerned. This concerns me. What your proposal is concerning. And it sort of becomes the one thing we can say to each other. Or in our praise, we become also sort of simplistic, and it's like, this is exciting, or this is great, or this is awesome. And every once in a while, I like to revisit these. And as I was thinking about chatting with you all about this today, I really and feelings that I've had and that I wanted to express. There was one that really stuck out to me, and it was rancorous. And I really wish last vintage of us, I could have said, I feel rancorous, and unproductive,
I'm getting ready.
and I don't want to feel this way. I want to feel excited and optimistic. But I'm sure fell into the trap of being unconcerned or just being nonverbal, which is the worst, instead of just being able to openly talk about it. I'm wondering as as you look at these, if there's any that you wish you had been able to share in the recent past with each other. I think the other one, and I'll leave you with this, is when I think about our future, and what I want to do and what I think we can do together. I think a word that I would often use now, right, is something like contented. Like, I feel like we got through it, and now we're gonna do interesting things, hopefully. What are some emotions you didn't get to express that maybe you want to express now
In the
and share
past or now?
from the past and about the future?
I'll definitely say that I got fidgety this morning. Sorry, I have, attention span stuff for long presentations. So I needed them to just keep anchoring things and how are we operating? How does this apply to what we do? And I trend towards fidgety, so that was going on this morning, if y'all picked it up. I tried to act on it and ask for what I needed. And I'm actually thrilled about our prospects, so I'm beyond contented. I'm really thrilled with where we got in the amount of time we've put in and the changes that we've made, and that's where I'm at.
Any other emotions of the feelings that the directors want to share?
I'm appreciative. Concerned a lot for others morally than myself. Lately I've been feeling a little mournful, been going through a lot of losses. But then that's where I get to come here and this uplifts me and it makes me feel radiant. So it's kind of like a shine in my little dark place. So. But overall, I think I'm happy.
Well, my hope is that from time to time you will revisit these pages and use the language of feelings as we go through our work, so that we have clarity about how the experience is making us feel. I think that is a helpful segue to the next thing I wanted to highlight in the book for you all, which is the importance of needs. And it's hard to express our needs. And sometimes when I think I've found the most challenging in communicating nonviolently, sometimes people do not have a very good handle of their needs, what their actual needs are, or they cannot be honest about what their needs are, because it would be embarrassing to be honest about their needs. And so I wanted to go through the exercises on this page together. And instead of, let me read to you the prompt.
Which page are you on?
65, I'm so sorry, 65. Mhm. To practice identifying needs, please circle the number. In this case, you're gonna raise your hand. For each statement where the speaker is acknowledging responsibility for his or her feelings. So statement number 1 is, you irritate me when you leave company documents on the conference room floor. So is that if I were to say that to you, would I be taking responsibility for my feelings? And why do you think not, Director Wedding?
You irritate me, wrong directional.
How would you reframe that in a nonviolent way?
Other people leave documents.
Yeah, the suggested language is, I'm irritated when you leave company documents on the conference room floor. Because I want our documents to be safely stored and accessible.
Early.
Yeah, so it's,
Need of mine.
I have this need. Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's do another one. Little things people say sometimes hurt me. Do you think that person's taking responsibility for their feelings? Here's what the author says. If you raise your hand, we're not in agreement. To express needs and thoughts underlying his or her feelings, the speaker might have said, sometimes when people say little things, I feel hurt because I want to be appreciated, not criticized. I always get that one wrong. But I find it helpful because even though the person's not blaming anyone, they are not taking they're not making themselves accountable for how things outside of them make them feel. And I like the reframing because it says, here are my needs.
Yeah, I think that applies to what happened collectively at the last board meeting.
Mhm.
Because we all were we worked so hard, we're looking to be appreciated, to be heard, to be seen, to be noticed, that we're trying to develop like criteria and markers. And those needs weren't getting met by the person who approached with some pretty loaded language. And so there was something they needed and that agency needed, that person wasn't doing a good job of expressing.
Yeah.
But they didn't hurt us, like we were experiencing a deficit of things that we needed from them.
Yeah, it is hard to adopt an outlook where you always express your needs from the point of view of you being fully in control, because there is always this instinct to want to blame things on the outside.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things we can do with each other is to get good at excavating sort of what is the need that you are actually trying to address. And I think it's really helpful to think about why are you here? Why are we here, right? Is it to what? And if you think about it, and I'll ask you at our next full board meeting, it's not a really easy answer. Because you want to be to serve or to help. But that is not a need. You don't need to serve. There's something else there. So please reflect on that. To finish, I want to go to back to the main diagram. When on page 231 and requests. And this one I'm going to ask staff for a little feedback on.
Can we ask all staff or just Diane?
Yes, we are can ask any staff.
Okay.
We may. I think this is in some ways, particularly for what we're going to do, a critical part, which is I think in our current board vintage, we will be good at talking with each other through observations and being clear about our needs. I think what's really tricky is translating that to specific requests. And we have a peculiar dynamic in that we have our relationship and then we have also our duties and folks that we work with, work for us, quote unquote, evaluate. And so there is this notion of having specific requests. When people ask you to do something, right, what helps you to be able to do it? So when people ask you to change, is that a helpful request?
No, I need reason. What's too big?
It's too vague, huh? You need,
It's too. Tell me why. I'm just tell me you need me to change. What did I do? What have I done wrong? Those are the questions that run through my head.
mhm.
Did it hurt you or? No. Why? Why is the change needed?
Mhm.
Give me reasons. Surrounding what? Like
Mhm.
be specific, those type of things.
Yeah.
I'm just so with that.
To continue with the example of the book, right? If somebody says, be less messy. Is that specific enough? You wouldn't, what are some of the details you would wanna hear for a be less messy request?
Be specific.
Yeah,
Example.
Cleaning, life, my conversation.
Right, right.
like, which part?
yeah,
Which part is messy? Now clean it. Which one?
yeah,
Specific, something a little endearing that'll make me want to listen to what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you wanted to ask for someone to be more specific, how would you ask? Like if I said, be less messy, how would you ask me to be more specific?
Could you specify on what less messy means to you? In regards to what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's right,
I
right.
don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's what I would say, I think the pantry is too disorderly. You put things in different places and it's very upsetting. Would you mind consistently placing things in the pantry? Is that specific enough?
That's specific.
Yeah, yeah,
What you doing in my pantry?
I'm doing the same thing.
are you at your pantry?
I'm like, oh, pantry, the jumbo.
What are you doing here?
Well, that's a good segue to this one and is of I think of peculiar interest to our staff.
Yes.
Because oftentimes we will make requests, right? We will say, translate from jargon to everyday lived experience, right? And I'm using this as an example.
Mhm.
It is, I think it's very directionally clear guidance, but obviously it could be misconstrued as vague. What are the things that you think are helpful from your experiences in terms of how we can, not in a non-toxic and collegial way, make requests that simplify taking action on our will. And that's open to anyone that wants to answer that one.
I'm not going first.
Public art.
Okay, all right, Mr. Keith.
I think this is a really good question, and first of all, and it's nice to have the opportunity to have a discussion like this, more than you know. When we're given directives, generally it's not so much a personal directive as it is, we want to present something in a different format, or we want you to help develop a policy, things of that nature. When somebody asks me to change something, the first thing that pops into my mind is why. Not necessarily, and I don't say that out of a resistive response, but I need to understand. That's just part of my nature. I need to understand, because if I understand, then I feel like I'm part of the process. And I see it helps me understand where we're going while we're making this change, and so it gives me a sense of direction. It helps me think about, okay, what's the best way to arrive, and what's the best way to present the information that you're asking for in a different format. Policy would be the same way. What is our goal for this requested change policy? What is it that the board is seeing that we haven't seen in the policy that they want to have included? And what was kind of a line of thinking that brought that about? And that helps them think through coming back to you with what you do a better job of anticipating what you are, or thinking through what it is you're looking for. It gives us more specific guidelines for thoughts. So for change, change isn't something that frightens me as a member of staff. I just like to be included on kind of what the thinking was as to why we're heading in a different direction. And I'm happy to go there. I just kind of would like to have a sense of being included in the thought process, even if it's after the board has made their decision. So that's something that's speaking for myself. That's something that's very important to me. Because I like to please people. That's kind of part of my personality. And so I like to know that when we come to the board, or I come to Diana with something that y'all have requested, it's really important to me that y'all be happy with it. And taking criticism is the same way. I love constructive criticism. That's okay with me. And I can tell you that, now shut up. In the last 4 months, I have received more inclusion, more recognition, and more satisfaction in my work than I did in the last 4 years. And that is due to the leadership that is in place with this board and with our new executive director. And it really does make a difference about how you feel when you come into the office in the morning. And it really does make you feel good about the work that you put in that week, or the idea that, hey, I've got developers that want to talk to us about a new development. And I'm really excited because I like this organization and I'm proud of this organization. And I want us to do better and I want to see us shine. And those are the things that I've experienced just recently, but it has been a sea change for me. And I'm very appreciative of it and I'm very thankful for it because I enjoy what I do. But I also enjoy being part of the mix as we go along the process of doing it. So that's my 2 cents.
Miss Honeycutt, yes, of course.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say, when Diana sent me my offer letter, I signed it and sent it back to her, and I said, I am so excited to be a part of SHFC. And then I said, and no, my O key was not stuck on my keyboard. I am, like I said, so excited to be a part of this, and even at leaving HATC for 18 years. So excited to start a new chapter, to be a part of this. And talk to Keith, we talk a lot when we're still in the office, and even now. Kind of like starting up an existing agency. I look forward to change. I look forward to grow in the challenge and the new developments, the new business that we get, and being able to help the community.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything? You don't have to feel coerced into doing it,
No,
okay?
because the one thing that came to mind in the example earlier today. In your request to have. Tying to sort of how does this actually affect our day-to-day work or. Something that I've seen be useful is having. 3, 4, 5 sort of core principles that an organization agrees on and is committed to. And I mean, I've seen people carry around a poster board to actually, have those listed out. Because in meetings like this, you may have people come and go, or, someone here for the first time. So it could just be on the agenda, but I think that's helpful to be able to anchor back to like, this is why I would be asking for this, because this is a priority. This is a value. This is something that's important to the board, to this organization, to the work that we're doing. And those can change, right? Because things change. They're not in concrete forever, but that helps me when I'm in a discussion, if everyone in the room can point to something that's been agreed upon and say, oh, I know why this change is being requested, or I understand because this is a goal, Keith mentioned. That's a key point for him, is understanding what the goal is. So if there are some broad goals that are agreed upon, that's useful for me, and I've seen it be useful for other people.
That's a very helpful request.
Very.
Very specific and helpful request, I think. Yeah, Director Running. Yeah.
Also, our IT person who I utilize all the time. If you have feedback on how I can make my requests to you, they're frequent.
I think there's always, going to be some issues, as we get things set up and transition to actual office, but I mean, it's fine. You can contact me whenever you need help.
Can I make it less painful for you somehow?
No, it's nothing.
Okay.
I mean, just email me, you know. This contract needs to be changed, you know, just sign a contract for the web. And now it's web and IT.
Mhm.
Oh,
It's in our contact. We'll check.
okay. Yeah, that's a good request. Make that request, yeah.
You know. I'm actually not sure if this is, I'm not gonna phrase it well as a request.
Okay,
But I'll tell you, I think something I struggle with is it, while we're in this phase, right, in particular of growing and ambition. I think staff and board are really excited and so many ideas about what we can do and what we want to do to improve. But still pretty limited bandwidth, you know, as we that, you know, gradually add staff. And this is actually something that draws on my previous experience as well. You know, if you think of city council as a board too, we would sometimes get asked to do something that in and of itself kind of made sense. But I think, and Bella talked about values, right? I also think priorities, you know, how we are prioritizing this. Because often it's something that has value and I'd very much like to see be done. But it may be crowding out work that feels like, you know, could be higher priority. And so actually, here's an example. When we had the real estate policy meeting last week, and you guys then were able to say portfolio review number one. It's like, oh, awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful, you know? So I know we won't always be able to number them, but I think as we mature, having sort of some specificity about kind of where you see this falling in urgency and priority is helpful for me.
I think it's a very helpful request to, as we make requests, to be able to develop language of high priority, nice to have, must have, low priority, so that you can calibrate where things fit in. To conclude this discussion, I wanted to sort of make two families of comments. One, to the overall team. Keith and Debbie, thank you for sharing kind of where you are at in your early journey with SHFC. It's very invigorating for us to know that you are excited to pursue your careers and give your labor to the organization we're trying to build together. Your labor is one of the most important sacred things you can give somebody. And so we want to value it and we want you to feel like it is being put to good use here. I hope that the example we're setting of pushing ourselves to talk with each other and the folks that we interact with in a better, more nuanced way that is better at the mission is indicative of what I think we will hopefully be in the future as we continue to grow. And thank you for feeling comfortable sharing your feelings with us. I think it's a place we want to be, where people feel comfortable saying, I have fear, or I have joy, or I feel rancorous, or whatever it might be.
Simmering umbrage.
It's like simmering umbrage must be addressed. It is my need. I have a need for calmness and order. I think that I really appreciate that. And I want to point out that there's a lesson there, given where we all started. you know, and kind of what we've been through on so many layers that you never know who you will need to make things better. And so it's always important to have grace and patience with each other. And then with our directors, I will say, this is a set of tools that I'm a champion of, and you were stuck with me for a little bit longer. It's very hard to switch because sometimes we're just being normal, right? And then sometimes something will happen. Usually there will be tension because we have to make a decision, or we're being attacked, or we want a change and we know that we're asking you for a change, and oh, I don't know if they're gonna like it, and they're the ones doing it. Sometimes it's helpful to say, I want to try now to speak non-violently, just to signal I'm gonna try. And so when we have external visitors who do not understand this, if you recall our incident that we were discussing from last session, in my second comment, I tried to talk about my feelings. And I think, you know, for this person, it was like, what is that? Because they're not in this space, and they weren't hearing like, this is my way of saying, I know that the first comment didn't land the way I wanted. So let me tell you where it was coming from and what I was feeling from my board that I care very much about, and the feelings that were going into that. I think some of you understood it because you had been exposed to the ideas here. They didn't. And we'll have to deal with that. But with each other, I think we can signal, hey, I think this might be challenging. I'm gonna try and in a nonviolent way talk about a request, or talk about some needs or feelings, or make an observation about behavior that's gonna lead to an additional discussion. I also hope that this will be an official marker amongst ourselves. That we now have a sanctioned way of talking about improving our performance. And so if you have dissatisfaction or needs, or you have needs in areas where you need us to do things better, like prioritize more clearly, that now you have a set of language that you can use to signal that we're going to engage in a challenging conversation, but in a way that we agree is not aimed at emotional harm or mental health attacks, but rather at amicably talking about difficult things. And it's just as simple as saying, all right, I'm gonna try and say this in a nonviolent way. And I hope that you are ready to receive empathetically. It seems silly, but somehow just pressing that, I think, can sometimes make people be ready to receive empathetically. Dr. Wenning.
Is there a way to capture a synopsis for onboarding future directors? So they can catch up to us and ramp up to where we are and understand our value. At respectful communication that, you know, ekes out what the shared needs and that, you know, are empathetically.
I have been thinking about that.
Okay.
I don't have an answer.
Okay.
I think we're gonna work on it together with our next appointee.
Okay.
I think it will be challenging because we will all be at different places.
Yeah.
But I have some ideas.
And also for staff, I guess.
Julio video.
Yeah,
and
I'll use
TED Talk.
AI to talk. No, I bet they could resurrect Mr. Rosenberg
I'm
as
sorry.
a robot
I'm doing
on a like your webpage. With all that said, I think this concludes this item, and so we do have one more item I do very much want to talk about, which is executive session. If we want to do Robert's rules now, we can do that.
I think we should.
Okay, so we can do it maybe at our full board meeting or at our next work session.
Yep.
The important thing is we have our handout. And my expectation is we're gonna converge to the rules there. And please bring your handout to our meetings, because we're gonna try and do it the way that the handout indicates. Did you want to add any?
Just, I would say. Thing at least I focused on initially
Mm.
is motions, et cetera. There's a lot of sort of additional little rules in there. That perhaps the board will want to adopt, but I think. You know, just kind of how we take up items and et cetera is really valuable in the core of it.
With that said,
We'll talk.
yes,
I have a couple areas.
Okay.
okay. With that said, if everybody is ready, I'm going to ask for us to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters. We do not need anyone to stay behind, and so we're going to pause record. To go into executive
I
session.
make.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?